What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shy, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. For everyone who's tuning in, we hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, help make this show the best that it can be. And we all need that support right about now. Subscribers, potential new subscribers, members of the crew, basketball fans around the world, we all need their support after we witnessed another lackluster All-Star game. And what's crazy about it is, now the one positive change that they did make was returning the game back to its original format, which they never should have changed. The Western Conference All-Stars versus the Eastern Conference All-Stars, or vice versa, whichever conference you prefer in terms of your favorite player, favorite team play out of. But nonetheless, that was positive. That was a positive. But they still not getting to the root of the problem, which shows that technically the format in of itself, even when you change it back to the original presentation, it still does not address the root of the problem. I've heard all kind of takes today from these so-called experts about what's wrong. They're looking at the symptoms, but they're not identifying the cause. Therefore, the problem continues to linger. So I always like to go back and revert and gravitate to the history. And the history will reveal what the problem is. So let's delve into that. Now, the All-Star game, NBA All-Star game, premiered and debuted in the in the 1960s, around the mid-60s, right? Okay. To build the league, they featured the greatest players in the game. What was the main criteria based on? It wasn't based on statistics. It wasn't based on, trying to score 200 points in a game. It was based on the very element that this game now currently lacks. It was based on competition. The eagerness to compete and to show who's best. Individually, team, conference. You're not just representing yourself, you're representing your team, your franchise, you're representing the conference that you play in, and you're representing the NBA in that order. And you're representing the fans that support you in that order. And see, the thing about it is, what I find is the people, the representatives of the league during that time, in all these sports leagues, the people that made the decisions as to how the league was going to be structured and what it was going to be based on, you can tell it was well thought out, because the original formats lasted for decades, from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s. The fundamental aspect of these games was well thought out. Not until recently, a new age of so-called influential voices felt that change was needed. But as they say, if it ain't broke, there's no need to try to fix it, because if you try to fix something that ain't broke to begin with, you wind up breaking it. And that's what's going on. Everybody who got a platform, a major platform, they trying to put their hands in the pot. They want their input known. And that's what's destroying the fabric of the game. See, the history, the past is a good thing. If you see something that exists and succeeds years after years after years, decades after decades, there's no need to change the fundamental aspect of it. Now, you can, like a player can have a uniqueness about them that enhances or how can I say, without compromising the integrity of what it is that they're representing, that they can bring their own unique perspective to it by the way they play. Not trying to change the structure, but by the way they play. Okay, so the fundamental problem that's going on is competition. How did this get compromised? Right? We didn't have this problem before in the 80s. And this is the killer part. If you go back and research the slam dunk contest, the original dunk contest was a concept that was brought forth by the ABA. Dr. J competed in the first contest, the first official dunk contest that featured professional basketball players. And he defeated David Thompson. That was in 1977. The NBA did not incorporate the slam dunk contest into its all-star activity until 7 years after the original dunk contest took place. But guess what? The NBA still existed. It still moved forward. It still built up on what they achieved from the previous decades and then took it to the highest level at the beginning of the 80s. Because it was based on the game. It was based on competition and superstars, new superstars entering the league. The Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, right? And they helped propel the NBA to never before seen heights, right? And then teams were elevated. So you didn't need the dunk contest for people to tune in and watch the All-Star game as the NBA began to reach its apex in terms of popularity, enthusiasm about the game. And then Michael Jordan, he took it and gave it a global precedence, right? So what I'm saying is the slam dunk contest, just as the 3-point contest, were secondary events. Okay. Fundamentally, it was secondary events. Okay, so let's peel back the layers. The game started to decline. I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. The game started to decline. You can trace it to 15 years ago. When the pendulum shifted and the arc changed. Now remember, the All-Star game is features the 24 greatest players in the world, right? The goal is to showcase your skills as superstars. I'm talking about as far as your most popular players that compete in that game, superstars. Then you have all-stars. Okay. All that began to change in a negative frame when we saw 3 superstar franchise players join forces in 2010. That's when the mindset of the superstar player began to compromise itself. Because instead of saying, I want to beat the best, now you're saying, I want to join forces. See, the only time that you should see multiple or a host of superstars on the court at the same time is during the All-Star game. So what happened was, when you saw 3 superstars, prime superstars, 2 top 5 players, 3 top 10 players join forces, that in of itself is a pseudo mini version of an all-star team. The all-star game is an annual event that we witness once a year. But a super team, which is let's say a junior version of an all-star team, you witness that throughout the course of the season. Then over the course of a period of years. So what you would be enthused about watching in the All-Star game, that has been undermined and diminished by the concept of the super team. So what happens when you see 3 superstars join forces? The mentality becomes compromised in all facets. Throughout the course of the season, you don't play as hard. We see that in today's All-Star game, right? The willingness to compete is undermined. That's what we see in today's All-Star game. The willingness to compete to the point where you're putting yourself in a position to where you can get beat. Well, we see that in today's All-Star game presentation where superstars no longer want to participate in the slam dunk contest. I can go on and on and on to prove why the All-Star game is now a reflection of all the ills that have permeated throughout the NBA landscape over the 15 years. So much so, this player right here, LeBron James, says after the game, when he was asked about the lack of competitiveness and excitement and overall lethargy, he says, I think it's something that we need to figure out. See, remember a couple years ago when they tried to incentivize the players financially to compete? This is when they still had that format of team this guy, team that guy. They incentivized the players to compete by creating this concept of where now it's not even about whoever winds up scoring, winning the game, whoever scores the most points by the end of the game, or whoever wins the game after the 4 quarters. Then they changed up to where the first team that scored, I think it was like 25 points in each quarter, that team is awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars to donate to the charity of their choice. And the initial game where they introduced that financial incentive, they played hard. But see, it wasn't real because you shouldn't have to incentivize players financially to compete, to be competitive in the All-Star game. That should be brought forth naturally. The pride of, first of all, being selected as one of the 24 best players in the world. The pride of representing your team. The pride of representing a conference. The pride of representing the fans. The pride of representing the league. The pride of showing that you want to be the best and showing why you one of the best in the world. That is all a detriment that is directly associated with the super team era. See, the whole era has been a detriment to just about everything associated with competition, Competition is something that you can't manufacture. Competition is something that is instinctually within the mindset and approach of a professional athlete. That's how they became. I mean, before this era was introduced to the league, that's an athlete's natural inclination to want to compete, to show that they the best. You don't want to join forces. But when that happened in 2010, it was like Pandora's box open. I want to say a culture shock, but it's not even a culture shock. It you open up Pandora's box now. Anything, it's like what you think may happen, the total opposite happens because you broke the code. Because you broke the code. So now, 15 years later, you got a guy that says, "I think it's something we need to figure out." They've been trying to figure this out for the past 5-6 years, and they still haven't come up with the solution because the root of the problem has not been addressed. And the guy who uttered that quote that I'm showing is a reflection of that. And you hate to say that for a player that's been associated with the National Basketball Association for coming up on 21 years. But unfortunately, he's at the center of a lot of this activity and behavior and presentation that is becoming a detriment to the league. That team in Miami, the so-called pundits thought, well, first of all, what it did was that team was not, when you join forces, it's not from a competitive framework. It's more of a sense of entitlement. So you hear all these conversations from fans and pundits and people who follow the league for a long time that the players seem entitled. Well, when you compromise competition, that's what happens. And so now, not only that, when you create the super team, defense became less of an emphasis. Because for all practical purposes, when you have 3 top 10 players on the same team, you don't have to rely on the fundamental aspects of basketball to succeed. You're winning strictly on super laden talent. So what happened was, as they started this era, they found out or discovered that, man, we don't have to play hard every game. We can just come out there, man. We'll get our stats or whatnot, and we don't have to put forth maximum effort. When I mean by maximum effort, I'm not saying no team is going to win every game. It's the NBA. What I'm saying is, as a means to measure yourself against the competition. See, when you stack the deck and form a super team, you're not trying to measure yourself. You're trying to gain an unfair competitive balance. So basically what has happened is the super team shouldn't even exist. It's diminished every fabric of the NBA. And it culminates and reflects itself in these all-star games. And that's why the players have such a laissez-faire attitude when they on the court doing their game. That's why. But they want to come up with all these ideas, man. You want to incentivize the players to compete. Give them $1 million for the winner. Well, they making 9 figures. That shouldn't be now. Quite naturally, you get paid some sort of reward for being selected as an all-star player, like a standard base, reward for that. So that alone, right there, that should give you the motivation. Naturally, just the pride of being an NBA player, and like I said, being selected as one of the greatest in the world, you should want to go out there, man, show the world why you was selected, why you was voted. That should be good enough. They tinker with it, and they getting further away from the essence of the game. But I believe personally, it all stems from what began in the summer of 2010, when the first ever NBA super team was introduced to the league and to the basketball conscious. And it's caused nothing but chaos ever since. And it may sound crazy, it may sound aloof, it may sound extreme, but all one has to do is peel back the layers one by one, and they will find the answer, because it's happening for a reason. It's not just on a humbug. This is something that has been, exacerbating and mounting year after year after year. But they don't want to admit. See, the thing about it is, and what it's showing is, like I said, it's not about the era. When it comes to talent, it's not about the era. It's about the mentality. What this is proving is that when former players of previous generations speak of their concerns about the league, it's showing that they're right. And that's why a lot of pundits of today do not want to acknowledge, because they want today's generation to stand above the previous generations. But that's not how the NBA was structured back then. Even when a new generation is introduced to the league and become prominent, those previous generations of players were always upheld in the highest esteem. Always. And I believe another major reason why the game has regressed is because of the disrespect of past generation of players. Because of this commentary by these pundits saying that today's players are that much better than yesterday's players, I believe that's what's creating the laissez-faire attitude. And it makes it difficult for them to uphold the standard, to carry on the tradition. Because the pundits, a lot of these pundits of today, they want tradition to be eliminated. But you cannot eliminate the history. Because if you don't have the history in the foundation, you really have nothing. And you're going to and fro, trying to come up with solutions every year. It's all a Jedi mind trick. And it gets back to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because more often than not, if you try to fix something that ain't broke, you're going to wind up breaking it. And to me, that's what's going on with the All-Star game. Fundamentally, that's the root of it. It's all about the mindset. Once the super team ends and all the negative influence have waned, I do believe that the game will return back. I put it this way, it would gravitate to what truly made it great, but in a way that represents the current time or the current generation of players, without compromising the competitive mindset. That's what I believe it is, man. It's that gap. It's that gap between reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality has been leading these players to think that they stand above the rest. But the reality is, no ever stands above nobody. It's all about the player. And once they understand that and eschew these narratives and stick to the appreciation and respect, then the game will return back to its rightful place. I believe that in my heart of hearts, man. I really do. I really do. I know these players feel something's wrong, but they're not. See, it's like this. It's like this. There's no balance in the critique. There's no balance. The people who have the voice right now are those who, you know, want to, shun history and tradition. There's nothing wrong with tradition. If tradition is proven to be successful and beneficial, there's nothing wrong with it. Actually, in a lot of cases, it's an honor to continue tradition. But when you try to break the mold, man, and try to reinvent the wheel, all right, at that point, all you're doing, man, is running around in circles. And the answer is staring everyone in the face. And it's putting the end of this super team and this mindset of superstars joining forces. And once again, these players will rekindle the pride of what it means to be selected as one of the 24 greatest players on earth. And that way, more than likely, superstars will be willing to participate in the slam dunk contest again, to where you don't see a G leaguer, one who's not even in the league, win the contest back to back. Once you compromise the competitive aspect, you compromised everything. That has to be addressed and corrected. And once that happens, then we won't be having these conversations no more. And we can enjoy the All-Star game the way we used to. So I just want to throw that out there. And until next time, this is JB for BTB, Behind the Bench.